I can appreciate them both equally for what they bring to these films, and I mean, it's not like we can do a clean compare and contrast because they both never appeared together in an American Ninja film. 1990's The American Ninja 4 feels a bit like an ending of an era for me personally. When I first started the channel many years ago, I picked up the complete American Ninja set from 88 Films as a solid starting off point in helping me get some action and martial arts movies into my predominantly horror and sci-fi bad movie diet. In fact, The American Ninja 2 was only the third review I'd ever written for the channel. And, over the last 5 years and some serious technical issues on YouTube's part, I'm finally coming to the end of the set. And, I don't know, it kind of feels like a bigger deal to me than it probably is. But this is the oldest Blu-ray left in my to-watch pile. We've been through a lot together. So I had high hopes that what I was getting into was going to be at least a decent enough send-off for the franchise that, on the whole, while not my favourite thing in the world, would have left me with a bit of a soft spot towards it. And, sadly, American Ninja 4 ends things with a whimper rather than a bang. For starters, the majority of the promotional material implies that this is going to finally be the big legendary uniting of the series' two lead actors, David Bradley and Michael Dudikoff. Indeed, on the surface level, all the promotional material would have you believe that this was going to be some kind of buddy martial arts movie. But instead, what's basically on offer here is a movie in two halves, with part 1 being David Bradley's time to shine as Sean Davidson, and part 2 effectively hitting the reset button to give Dudikoff his own mini-movie as Joe Armstrong. With the pair only meeting up in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the movie, and even then the meeting is basically just to sort of bro-hold each other before going off in their separate ways to resolve various different plots within the film. There are several reasons cited as to why this is the case, but given the history of this series, I think that David Bradley's recounting of events seems to be the more likely true version. Basically, Bradley was signed on early into this production before a script had even really been completed, but he was aware that Michael Dudikoff was in talks to appear in the film as well. Bradley lobbied the filmmakers alongside the rest of the cast to try and shape the script into a bit of a tandem feature, with Sean and Joe teaming up to take down a rogue terrorist organisation. The pair would have split duties and would share the screen evenly as friends throughout the runtime. Unbeknownst to Bradley, however, Dudikoff was playing hardball behind the scenes and basically refused to appear in the movie unless his character alone was responsible for saving the day, and he wanted the script specifically tailored so that he was seen as superior in almost every way to Bradley's character. As such, rather than cause arguments, the scriptwriters basically agreed to most of Dudikoff's demands, and in order to try and keep the peace on set, the film was effectively split in half, with each actor getting their own respective mini-movie. So, American Ninja 4 opens with Bradley's portion of the film, and he's attending the wedding of his best friend Carl, who we've never met despite him being one of the best fighters that the US government has on its books. Anyway, in typical late 80s, early 90s cop show style, the pair get called away on emergency business while they're at the altar about to do the I-do's. When they arrive at whatever government facility the pair are supposed to be working for, it's revealed that a great danger is on the horizon. An ex-British soldier called Mulgrew has gone rogue and teamed up with a terrorist group to both train its members in the art of the ninja, while also acting as a middleman in order to secure materials to construct a small but devastating nuclear device. The US government initially sent in a crack squad of commandos to bring in Mulgrew, but him and his team of ninjas killed a couple of them and took the rest hostage. Mulgrew's demands are simple. He wants $50 million in cash and several terrorists released from prison, or they're going to kill the commandos and detonate the nuclear bomb. The plan's pretty simple. The pair are to airdrop into the outskirts of a village where they're to meet a contact who will take them to the US forces' connections in the field, with the aim of bringing Mulgrew and any additional terrorists in while also freeing the hostage commandos. Sean initially tries to stop Carl from going by suggesting that they reach out to one of their more knowledgeable contacts, like, for example, Joe Armstrong. But Joe's gone AWOL, isn't responding to calls, and was last seen working for the Peace Corps. So, the pair put on their parachutes and within 24 hours they're out in the wild and hooking up with their contact, Pango, who takes them to a nearby bar where the motto is, "How tough are you?" Which becomes quickly obvious as no sooner have Sean and co entered the bar owner tries to get them thrown out for not being tough enough and a brawl ensues. Post-scuffle, the barman takes Sean upstairs to fill him in on the current happenings with Mulgrew. He also quite conveniently warns them that should the bar be raided and everybody be killed horribly, that Sean and whoever's travelling with him are to head to a location known as Sulphur Spring to try and hunt down a certain Dr. Tamba. And would you know it, as soon as that information's handed over to Sean, then Mulgrew's men burst into the bar and waste everyone, with Sean, Carl and Pango ending up going into hiding in a nearby mortuary with the assistant of a Peace Corps mortician technician called Dr. Sarah, who then decides to tag along with them on the way to Sulphur Spring. However, while resting up and training to keep his ninja skills sharp in a woodland outback, David and co are attacked by a horde of ninjas. After a brief skirmish, they're all pretty much captured. They're taken to Mulgrew's secret ninja training and nuclear weapon encampment, previously a British fort that's now decommissioned, and the gang are taken into the basement of the fort to be tied up with the surviving commandos, with the ransom reiterated to the US with an added "don't fuck with us" tacked on for good measure. So that's this film's part 1, and I say that because the story of Sean and co pretty much ends there until the last 10 to 15 minutes of the film. Part 2 of this movie picks up with Michael Dudikoff back in the role of Joe Armstrong. Seemingly after the events of American Ninja 2, he gave up his life of sleuthing for the army and instead decided to become a teacher working in developing countries. Things are going pretty pedestrian, but it's better than being too action-packed. That is, until a government agent tracks him down and tells him pretty much the entire plot of the film up to this point. This is all too much for Joe to make a committed decision on, so we're treated to a lovely montage of him sitting by a lake having a cup of tea. After pondering for a time, he agrees, and it pretty much instantly then cuts to him meeting with Pango, who wasn't captured by the ninjas somehow. Pango fills Joe in with the exact circumstances of Sean, Carl and Sarah's capture, and he also fills him in on Sulphur Springs, which is where they're set to travel to. After a brief and slightly pointless ninja fight, the pair arrive in Sulphur Springs, which is almost entirely inhabited by rejects from a Mad Max movie. They too are also playing by the rules of "How tough are you?" and after Joe kicks their asses, they're summoned to the upper housing complex of Dr. Tamba. They fill the doctor in on everything that's going on, and they agree that the best plan will be to sneak into a fascist and evil baddie soiree that's coming up at the fort, nick some maps of the fort's layout from the basement, and try to find a weakness to break in covertly. And that's what they do. Joe disguises himself as a priest, goes to the party, knocks a guard out and steals the fort's floor plans, and then while he's escaping, Mulgrew gets alerted to the break-in and the baddies shake their fist disapprovingly at Joe as he speeds off in his car. Enraged, the baddies decide to bring their plans forward, moving the bomb to a new safe location and bringing the prisoner's execution date forward to the next day. And so, we enter the final act of this film, as Joe's newly established Mad Max army must storm the fort to beat up all the ninjas. This is of course a distraction while Joe sneaks into the complex via an old abandoned ammunitions tunnel to free the hostages, and for one last time prove to anyone who'll listen that no one should mess with the American Ninja. And I've got to be honest, this film was a total disappointment across the board. It really doesn't feel like an American Ninja movie. In many ways it feels like it's just retreading old ground, but with half the likeable elements missing. For starters, the location the film is set in is almost identical to the one used in the American Ninja 3. There are some similar plot beats between American Ninja 3 and 4, and the plot of the first half of the film is loosely readapted to rerun in the second half of the film. While this is going on, the ninjas, while prominent, are also kind of surplus to the story. Whereas super ninjas have played a key role in the last 3 entries, we're dealing here with a bad guy who just so happens to train ninjas, which is a kind of core mechanic being taken clean out of the film. And most devastatingly of all, Steve James isn't in this one, and that guy's almost the spirit of this series, so that was a terrific loss. The script is fairly uninteresting. Like I say, the weird choice to keep both lead actors separate to their own sections of the movie has meant that this just feels like two short films that overlap rather than one coherent production. I really wish they'd been able to pair the two up from the off, as I think that would have been a much more constructive and enjoyable way to spend 96 minutes. Instead, because of the split and because of the borrowed plot themes shared across the two halves, it's left a film that's passable in the first half and way too familiar in the second. There's a more than decent wodge of padding in action here, and some of the worst fake-out moments I've seen in film history are just rammed into this film to fill the runtime. The most egregious of which, and mild spoilers here, comes from a scene where Joe goes into the basement to rescue Sean, only to find that Sean wants to kill him. Joe beats up Sean in a 5-ish minute scene, and when Sean's out cold, Joe goes to inspect him only to find it's not Sean at all. It's a ninja wearing a Sean mask. Which, why? What was the relevance? When did they have time to make a perfect likeness of Sean? They didn't know Joe was going to invade the fort that day, so how would they have prepped for that? It's so stupid. And apart from the fact that this film feels like two films stapled together with a recycled plodding plot and a real lack of any kind of charisma or charm, the dialogue is just so poor. It's just bland, lifeless lines aimed solely at creating hyper-artificial drama and to fill the runtime. We must have to sit through plot updates at least every 10 minutes or so. I'm not joking, from start to finish the whole plot of the movie is described by both Sean and Carl twice. Then when the gang get captured, the plot's recounted up to Sean and Carl's capture twice to Joe, and then Joe recounts the plot up to arriving at Sulphur Springs to Dr. Tamba. And it's not done in an interesting or necessary way, it's done in a we're running short kind of way, which sucks. Add in several fight scenes that aren't as good as previous efforts and technically are very lacking, but more on that later, and the result is a finale which not only was super underwhelming, but also made me actually snort laugh at times by how cringy and awkward it was. You end up with a script that, to me at least, it's just totally amateur hour. The script was written by James Booth under a pseudonym of David Geeves. Booth also played the lead British baddie Mulgrew in this, and would it surprise you to learn that he wrote all the best lines for himself? But more on that shortly. Booth has 6 credits to his name and was last spotted in 1987 writing the script for The American Ninja 2, which I think is probably his best known movie. He died in 2005 at the age of 77. And, on directing duties, we see the return of Cedric Sundstrom, who I covered previously in my American Ninja 3 review, so no need to retread that old ground. The direction here is just about passable. It's technically proficient for the most part, but it is a bit on autopilot for a more than decent chunk of the run. A lot of scenes are just shot to standard without that much thought or passion put into how to get the best out of the scenarios on display. As such, we end up with a pretty flat movie with not a lot to say and even less to show. I mean, the end of this film is Mad Max Raiders vs Ninjas, and while it does have a sense of grandness about it, being grand and feeling grand are two different things. And this film just doesn't feel like the grand spectacle that it should be. The fight scenes don't fare much better. In previous entries, a real attempt was made to get into the action, to have plenty of cuts to help sell the fast pace and intense nature of the ninja fights. And that's pretty much absent here. Most fight scenes get about as close as a mid-close-up, and for the most part they don't even bother with soft contact or masking punches and kicks. They literally just cut away before contact is even made, then when we cut back, the victim's on the floor. Only, due to some mixed ability editing going on, things like that mostly come across as just badly handled. It'll either cut to the wrong angle, showing very obviously that whoever's fighting isn't making contact with the other person, or it'll cut too early or too late, meaning the effect of attempting to mask the shots with editing falls flat on its face. And those editing problems plague the film throughout most of the runtime, with one particular shot of an exploding ninja being swapped out to a dummy being so haphazardly done, I was left in stitches. The cine, much like the direction, is pretty much flat. There's just not enough shots present in this to help keep the scenes interesting. And even if they do up the shot count, it's usually for scenes that didn't need the boost anyway. It just feels really slapdash, with the majority of the film looking like it was shot wide for coverage. It feels distinctly lacking as a result. It's functional, don't get me wrong, there's no bad compositional framing, and the shots they do cut to and from line up nicely enough, but that's all it does. Combining it with some slack editing has just left it feeling a bit rickety, especially when compared to Furstenberg's work with the first two films. Performance-wise, this is a total nothing of a film. David Bradley, who in the previous entry seemed to really develop quite nicely into the new lead for the series, is here pretty much knocked way back in terms of character development. I mean, he gets almost no time to shine in the opening half of the movie and spends the second half trapped or following Joe's orders. Which is a real shame, because I feel like there was real scope to continue developing what was established in American Ninja 3. Dudikoff's performance in this is odd. He seems to have forgotten how to play Joe as a character, bearing in mind that in the first film he was pretty much a mute, and in the second film he was the straight guy to Steve James' charismatic foil. Here, he's just playing his own brand of generic action guy, and while he's not strictly bad, if what Bradley said about him behind the scenes is true, then the guy at the time had a serious ego problem, and that's all I can really say about it. As for the rest of the cast, the problems aren't strictly related to what's there, but rather what's not. With most of the supporting cast being fairly unremarkable to bad, and as I will continue to carp on about, Steve James' absence from this is unfixable. An American Ninja film without Steve James is like a pizza without cheese. It's just wrong on almost every level. In fact, the only other actor who I will say is absolutely brilliant in this is James Booth as Mulgrew, who, being the writer of this project, clearly relished the opportunity to write an unhinged bastard of a character with which he plays with an absolute unflinching delight. He's just a touch campy, but mainly gives a completely straight performance throughout, resulting in what's arguably one of the most eccentric performances in the series. His character literally stopped me from turning the film off at multiple points, and I think if the film kept his scenes in and was just about 20 minutes shorter, I'd say it'd probably be 10 times more enjoyable for it. Finally, the soundtrack. And we're once again into fairly generic, lifeless territory. If you want an idea of how little a shit they gave about this film's soundtrack, the end credits has a single song play through it that runs shorter than the credits do by quite a margin, meaning we go from awkward dollar store foreigner sound to an even more awkward silence as the film slides off the projector into the bin. The rest of the score's much the same, just Casio-style synth fodder, cheap and tinny. It fits the genre the film's working in, but that's all it does. The American Ninja 4 was released in 1990 on VHS by Nico Film and Video. It skipped a DVD release in the UK before landing on Blu-ray courtesy of 88 Films, both as a solo release and as part of the American Ninja collection in 2015. There's no extras on the set, and the picture quality is pretty solid given the cine is nothing to write home about. I'm not sure if it's a technical issue from the print itself or if it's bad mastering on behalf of the Blu-ray release, but the sound mix on my copy was a bit all over the place. Explosions and loud noises were peeking through my system while I had to keep cranking the volume to make out the dialogue. It meant I spent the majority of the film riding the volume clicker, which was not an ideal experience. The American Ninja 4 was a letdown in comparison to the films that came before it. What was suggested in advertisements and promotional work for this film is literally nowhere to be seen in this movie. When you look at the American Ninja 4 poster, it gives the impression that you're going to see a buddy action film that's going to pay back the fans of the franchise by putting its two biggest stars side by side in a big final send-off. What we've got here instead couldn't be further from that if it tried. This is a bland movie that not only fails to live up to expectation, it fails to live up to any of its predecessors either. With bland cine, direction that's on autopilot, a script that feels like two films stapled together, a droning soundtrack and performances that left a lot to be desired, The only thing more depressing than finding out the American Ninja 4 wasn't very good is finding out that there's an American Ninja 5.